everybody, my name is Kyle, I'm This9. Welcome back to another video. Today, in this one, it's going to be another tier list video, and in this one, it's going to be on Meta Staples post Phantom Nightmare. Yes, Phantom Nightmare is now out, and it's looking to be a game-changing set, and with game-changing sets, the Meta Staples will always be changing. So without further ado, we do have a lot of cards to talk about. Let's get into the tier list, shall we? The first card up we'll start off with is Dark Ruler No More. This card is always weird because it's a good card. Don't get me wrong, it's a good card, but it's not the greatest in the world right now. Just because a lot of people can play around it. Like, what does this exactly do against like the Snake Eyes end board? Right, it doesn't really do that much because a lot of the Snake Eyes end boards rely on their like graveyard and stuff like that. So this isn't the greatest thing in the world against them. Also against like, you know, like Labyrinth, like what the hell is this doing against Labyrinth? This is like okay against something like maybe like a Voiceless Voice, right? Because I mean they do end on a lot of negations, but they still have the trap that you have to worry about, right? But again, this is like a cool card. I'll put it in some side decks just because you can theoretically think of decks that this can hit, especially like rogue decks. But for right now, I honestly don't think it's the greatest in the world. Next thing up is Droll and Lockbird. Yeah, this probably goes here now. Yeah, Droll is pretty much going to be played everywhere because pretty much every deck dies to Droll right now. Something like, you know, Snake Eyes, even though they can pretty much play through the Droll and Lockbird, it prevents them from getting to other engines in their deck, right? Same thing when it comes to like maybe Voiceless Voice as well, where Droll hits it pretty hard. A lot of the rogue decks right now in this meta as well pretty much die to this card. So a lot of people are going to be main decking this card right now. So it's for sure going to be in most main decks, that's for sure. Next thing up here is Mind Control. So I got a lot of hate for this one in the last one, the last time I did this, because a lot of people, because I put Change of Heart below Mind Control. Now at the time I did that because Mind Control was at 3, and my problem was not because I think Mind Control is a better card than Change of Heart. I don't think so. Change of Heart is better, but Mind Control is at 3 compared to Change of Heart only being at 1, right? So that's more consistency when it comes to seeing the card. So that's why I put it above it in the last tier list. But in this one, yeah, this Change of Heart goes above this just because a lot of people are even somewhat main decking this right now because it is just a good card. It hits the Snake Eyes matchup pretty well. The only thing that doesn't really hit the Mind Control, this Change of Heart, is something like the Voiceless Voice where you just can't target is the problem. But again, this pretty much is really good right now. So we'll put, again, in this one, I'll put Change of Heart above Mind Control just because we've seen where Mind Control even being at 3, people aren't playing it just because Change of Heart type effects ain't that great. So you're only going to use it when you have like the triple tactic thrust in the deck. But even though, you know, Change of Heart is the better card for sure as well. So we'll put Mind Control in some main decks and then Change of Heart in most side decks. Or sorry, Mind Control in some side decks and then Change of Heart in most side decks. Anti-Spell Fragrance. Yeah, this is for sure going into most side decks for sure. No one's going to be main decking this card unless you're fucking crazy, but again, most side decks for sure. A lot of decks are playing spells right now, so being able to turn off the spells are going to be absolutely insane. So yeah, Anti-Spell for sure is going to be in most side decks right now in this meta. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Oh boy. Okay, so this is a little bit of an interesting one, right? So it's always really been in most main decks, because if you're going to be playing a Hand Trap, you're going to be playing Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. But the problem with this meta is, against something like the Snake Eyes, for one, it's probably not going to do that much. It's probably not going to end their turn or anything. But two, you just gave them a heated target, so it makes it easier to go into like the Promethean Princess, into the Ambler Well and stuff like that, right? So this is becoming less and less great, but I still think it belongs in most main decks because a lot of people are still playing Ash Blossom in the main deck because it is Ash Blossom. It's always going to hit a deck no matter what deck you're playing against. It's going to hit that deck. So that is for sure, but I can see this dropping off in the later future, but it's always in the top of most main decks. Nah, I think Droll is getting played more than Ash Blossom is right now. Now on to the book card. So this is Book of Eclipse here. I think I have Book of Moon somewhere. So we'll put Book of Eclipse here, and we're going to put Book of Moon. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. I think Book of Eclipse right now is just better than Book of Moon. If you're going to be playing Book of Moon, you're going to be most likely main decking it, but I don't think it's doing that much right now. I think Eclipse is doing okay. I don't think, again, it's not the greatest in the world, but put it into the top of some side decks, and then we'll put Book of Moon below it. Again, I think Eclipse is better, but there's very niche scenarios where this comes up, but it does come up. So something like against like the rogue matchups against something like the Voiceless Voice or something like Flunder or even Castria, like this absolutely does come up, but like Voiceless Voice is just going in to negate this. But against Cash, I mean, it does hit Cash a lot right now, so, and Cash is becoming a really good deck in this meta right now as well, so I can see this being in some side decks. I don't think it's going to be main deck just because it doesn't really do anything against like the Snake Eyes stuff, so yeah, this is pretty much there, but again, not a bad option when it comes to this meta. Bestials, this is interesting. So the Bestials kind of dropped off because there's really nothing to hit in this meta right now. So the only decks that's really hit is Labyrinth and Voiceless Voice, and that's about it. And like Labyrinth doesn't necessarily need their reoccursion in the graveyard if they have their traps on field. And Voiceless Voice, if they know you're playing the Bestials, they're just going to play around it. They're going to make sure low never hits the graveyard, right? So I think this finally drops off to some side decks. It's always been like a most side deck card, but I think it drops as a some side deck. Now, again, it depends on the deck you're playing. If you're playing like the Bestial Runic Synchro deck, then obviously this is in your main deck, but that's more used because they're level 6s than they are hand traps in that deck. So if you're just going to use this as hand traps, I think it goes into some side decks. Now, we'll put it to the top, but again, I just don't think it's the meta for it right now, so we'll put it in some side decks. Called by the Grave. This goes into most main decks. Everyone's going to be playing this card right now. Not only does it hit every fucking hand trap in Oblivion, but even going second, it's not that bad of an option because a lot of this meta relies on the graveyard. Something like the Snake Eyes deck comes up. So even going second, this can be used as interruption for your opponent as well. So again, this belongs in most main decks as well, for sure. Darkhole, again, it's not the greatest in the world. We'll put it in some side decks, I guess. We'll put it like there. It's probably fine. I think that's a probably fine spot for it. Again, it's cool, but again, like the Snake Eye stuff, like if you Darkhole it, if they're playing the Fire King version, they're just going to get those reoccursion back. Anyway, oh, my bad. Sorry about that. Darkhole, again, like it's not the greatest in the world. There are situations where this can just end people's turn. A lot of people are not ending on Omni Negate, so it's not the worst idea in the world. I just don't think it's the greatest either. So some side decks for sure. Cosmic Cyclone. Okay, so this is coming back into meta. Why is that? Well, one, it hits the Runic matchup pretty well, but number two, versus like the Snake Eyes Fire King matchup, the Cosmic hits that pretty well as well. And number three, like the Voiceless Voice being able to end on their like barrier and the trap, that's pretty good. So Cosmic Cyclone being able to hit that as well is very insane. I've seen some people actually main deck this card, but we're going to put it in most side decks for sure. I think it's going to be a most side deck card. Don't be surprised if you see it in some main decks, but I think it's going to be in most side decks, especially like into game threes, like when people put in like the anti-spells and shit like that. Cosmic Cyclone is absolutely going to come up for that. So for sure going to be a most side deck. I think this goes above here just because there's a chance you see this in some main decks for sure. Forbidden Droplet. I don't know. It's not the greatest in the world. I think it's going to be, I think it could be in most side decks. I could see it as that. I just don't think it's going to be that. I think it's better than a lot of the cards in some side decks, but I think it's not the best in the world when it comes to most side decks. I'm going to put it there for sure. Droplet's always been a good card in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's for sure, but again, doesn't really hit that much. I don't know. This card is decent, this meta. It's not the worst idea in the world. I just hate that you have to get rid of like hand advantage or like cards on field just for you to activate the effect, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but still something to think about, right? And my chair is moving down. Something moves back up. All right. Infinite Impermanence. Again, another card that will be in most main decks. Says it's Infinite Impermanence. It's a hand trap that doesn't die to something like, or doesn't get hit by like triple tactic talents or something like that. Doesn't die to like Infinite Impermanence either. A nice card drawing as a 6th card as well. Like it's not the, it's a very good card. It's going to be in most main decks for sure. Crossout Designator. Oh boy. So this card, last time I put it in niche because I just didn't think it was that great. But a lot of people are picking up on Crossout Designator right now. And a lot of people are going to be side decking it, I think, right now. I think it's going to go above this. Just because a lot of hand traps in this meta, a lot of people are playing the same hand traps. Like Droll, Ash, Imperm. Like you can probably guarantee people are playing those cards. So Crossout's going to hit those cards. So like if you were, like same thing with like, if you die to something like Dimensional Shifter, you just like side in like 3 Crossout to 1 Shifter. And then Crossout pretty much hits that, right? So I can see this being in most side decks right now, which is surprising, but just because a lot of the hand trap lineup is pretty much the same when it comes to this meta right now, so Crossout is good when it comes to that. Next thing up here is Super Polymerization. I can see this in some main decks. It's not going to be in most main decks, but I can see it in some main decks. I can also see some people side decking it as well, for sure. But like, again, it's a very good card, but the problem with Super Poly is if it's in meta, people are going to be playing around it, and that is the problem with Super Poly right now, is like the Snake Eyes deck can pretty much play around it. The Voiceless Voice, if you get Super Poly, you have the spell in graveyard just to get back your guys anyway, so it's not the greatest against them either. But again, I can see this being in some main decks for sure. Not going to be in most because some people are going to side deck it, but I can see it being in some main decks for sure. Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. This feels like a side deck card right now. I can see it in some main decks for sure, like depending on what your hand trap lineup wants to be, but I think this goes to some main deck for sure. I don't think it's the maybe most side decks. Maybe most side decks. I can see this being a side deck card at the best, but I can see it in some main. I'll put it in some main decks. So this card is seeing a lot of play right now. Very good. It hits a lot in the meta right now as well, just because a lot of cards are revolving around the graveyard. So yeah, Ghost Bell for sure I think goes into some main decks. Enemy Controller, another card that's very, very good right now. Not only because Voiceless Voice can take advantage of it, but, you know, Snake Eyes, they end on a shit ton of monsters. Being able to Enemy Controller take a guy is pretty cool. Now, I think these are better than, like, the Change of Heart type effects, like the Change of Heart and Mind Control, just because it does tribute, so it helps you dodge, like, removal stuff as well, something like a targeted negation, like Infinite Impermanence or something like that. So I do think this is better than, like, the Change of Heart and stuff like that. We'll put it in most side decks, maybe some main decks. It's crawling into some main decks, but I'll put it into most side decks. Again, very good card in this meta right now. Summon Limit is kind of the same thing as Anti-Spell Fragrance. You're going to see this in the sideboard, especially when you know you're going first. Summon Limit just ends turns, right? So again, it's going to be in most side decks right now. It's only gets played if you're playing a deck that dies to Anti-Spell, but you don't want to play the Anti-Spell, so you put Summon Limit in instead. So that's where I think that goes into as well. Sorry about that cut there. I had to go deal with my dogs for just 1 second. But next thing up here is Harpy's Feather Duster. Okay, so again, this is probably going to be in most side decks. I'll put it like there just because, I mean, again, if you're versing the back row matchup, Feather Duster is always just going to check the back row matchup. Something like the Rescue Ace comes up as well. Again, probably going to be in most side decks. It's always been a card that will be in most people's side deck just because it is a good card, so that doesn't change at all. Dimensional Barrier. I'll put this in like some side decks, I guess. Again, it doesn't really hit that much in this meta, surprisingly. The only thing it really hits is like maybe the Voiceless Voice when it comes to rituals, and purely when it comes to XYZs, and that's it. Every other deck doesn't really need die to Dimensional Barrier right now, so I don't really think this is going to be played right now in this meta right now. I can maybe see it in some side decks, but not the greatest in the world. DD Crow. I think this is a really good card. Some main decks for sure. Again, this is always a weird one because every time we're like in an early format, DD Crow seems fucking insane, but the later we go into the format, the less and less it sees play. Again, I still think DD Crow is fucking insane in this format, but a lot of people have been choosing to play like Ghost Bell instead and stuff of it, which makes sense. This hits more than what DD Crow is going to hit, but I still think DD Crow is a very insane card right now, especially like with like the Snake Eyes engine running around and like Soul Release being played as well, which is a card I don't have on here, but like Soul Release is getting side decked in cards. Like DD Crow seems like it's just a decent option for this meta right now, but I can see why people aren't playing it, but I still think it's a good card, so I'm going to put it into some main decks. Next thing up here is Different Dimension Ground. This is for sure getting played in some main decks just because of this card. Where is it? Triple Tactic Thrust, which I'll put in some main decks as well. So kind of the thought idea here is if they hand trap you, they'll just go Triple Tactic Thrust into DDG, and DDG pretty much hits a lot in this meta. Hits the Snake Eyes, hits the Voiceless Voice, anything that relies of the graveyard, this is pretty much going to hit, right? So that's kind of the idea with it. You can also maybe go like Taruma Cannon, which I think is a little worse. I think the DDG is better. So that's why you could maybe see it in some main decks right now because of that reason with Triple Tactic Thrust. But I can see it in the side deck as well if you're really that curious. But I think Anti-Spell and Summon are the better side deck cards there. So for sure, get them played like that. Evenly Matched, a really good card, goes into most side decks right now just because It's evenly matched. It hits a lot, especially into the rogue matchups as well. Don't be surprised if you see this a lot in the side decks. Pinkertops is a weird one. This card is at 2 and it's really good, but a lot of people are choosing to play other cards instead of it. I still think it's a very good card, but a lot of people are choosing to play other cards. So we'll put it into some side decks right now. I'll put it at the top of some side decks because, again, still think it's a very fucking good card, but a lot of people are not choosing not to play it. Contact C, it's the worst fucking card in the universe. It's in niche. Again, as long as SP exists, this card will be bad, so don't play this card. Effect Veiler, probably in some main decks. It's not going to be in most main decks, again, depending on what your hand trap lineup is looking like. Again, I think Veiler goes into some main decks. Again, it's a card that you either main deck or you just don't play at all. But again, a lot of people are seeing play, trying to get as much hand traps into their deck as possible because it feels like it's one of those metas where you just want to play as much hand traps as possible. So we'll put it into some main decks. Curry Card, Divine Card is probably going to be in most side decks just because the Snake Eyes variant can search this out, and it's actually not terrible this format. So we'll put it like here is probably fine. I think that's probably a fine spot for it. Phantasme is a really good card because a lot of people are link summoning this format. I'll put it like above, like right there. It's cool. It always depends on what you draw off of it is the thing. But again, a lot of people are side decking this card. Dimension Shifter. Oh boy. Yeah, this goes to the top of some main decks. So if you're a deck that does not care about their graveyard, then you're absolutely main decking this card because Shifter is fucking insane in this format. So again, because just a lot of graveyard reliant strategies are in the format. So again, Shifter is Shifter. It's just a card that I always have to worry about. It's never going to be in most main decks because not every deck can play Shifter, but it's always for sure going to be in some main decks for sure. Gamma, the problem with Gamma is this card is at 1, and I think that's the real problem with it. So I'm going to put it in niche. Still, I think it's a very good hand trap, but the fact that it is at 1 is what makes it a problem. Triple Tactic Talents. Wow, this card is insane in this format. I think it goes into most main decks for sure. Just because, again, a lot of people are on the hand trap variants right now instead of like board breakers. So that makes Triple Tactic Talents better going first. But going second, just trying to break a board with it as well, makes it really good as well. You could probably see it in most side decks as well. But I think this is a good card enough where it's in most main decks right now. Castria Fenrir is maybe in some main decks. I think I'll put it like there is probably fine. Kind of fell off because, again, a lot of people are moving towards hand traps, and Fenrir doesn't really do enough when going second anymore right now, but it's still a good card. It's one of those cards that you either main deck or you just don't play at all. I don't think this is really a good side deck option right now in this meta. So if you're going to play it, you're going to be playing it in the main deck for sure. But again, I kind of fallen off. I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world. Again, a lot of hand traps are becoming better right now. Impulse, I like the idea of this card. I really do, but I think Phantasme is just a little bit better right now than it. But I wouldn't be surprised if this gets swapped, like Phantasme is, or Impulse is better than Phantasme. Again, Impulse, kind of the same idea as Phantasme, but Impulse, you discard the card instead of putting it to the bottom of the deck like Phantasme does, which depending on the deck you're playing could be better. And then Lightning Storm, again, I think this kind of fallen off. It's with Feather Duster for sure. I think it's lower than Feather Duster. I think Evenly Matched is just the better card than these two right now are. So this goes into most side decks. Marionette Might is fucking niche. This card has always been garbage, even when it's scheme played against Unchained. I just don't think it's the greatest in the world. Snatch Steal, again, it's kind of those Change of Heart type of effects. So I'll put it like right next to Change of Heart. Because at least Change of Heart can be searched out through like Thrust or something like that. So we'll put it like that right now. Kaiju, probably only in some side decks. It's not going to be in most side decks because, again, it's not the greatest in this format either. Again, maybe purely, and that's about it. Floodgate, so there can only be one. Rivalry of Warlords and Goes in Match will be included with this. Again, I think it's niche just because they're all limited, so it's highly unlikely you're going to be seeing it. You're not going to be main decking those cards, and you're most likely not going to be side decking these cards because I think Anti-Spell and Summon Limit are just better. And then Herald the Abyss, again, it's searchable through Triple Tactic Thrust. I'll give it that. But again, I don't think it's the greatest in the world, so we'll put it in some side decks. And then last card here is Nibiru, the Primal Being, which I think goes into some main decks as well, just because it's Nibiru. A lot of people are summoning a lot this format as well, especially like the Rogue matchups as well. It's playing into Nib a lot, so playing this in your main deck could be a nice choice as well. So that is my tier list. I kind of skipped along at the end, just because I knew this was going to be a long video. But again, most main decks, as you can see, in most and some main decks, a lot of the hand traps are in there, just because it feels like this is going to be a hand trap format. So that's why a lot of the hand traps are in the upper echelon of the tier list here, and a lot of the board breakers are a little bit less and like more in the side decks more than they are in the main decks. And I don't think that's going to change. Again, Snake Eyes is one of those decks that's going to rank like slot in 15 hand traps and then 1-card combos after that, and I feel like that's how the format is going to be. So yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more content on the channel. And actually, hold up, before I do this, let me show the camera here, because triple attack, thrust, and DGG war game blocked out by my camera. So if you kind of skip to the end here, this is my tier list there. But yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe for more content on the channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.